Welcome to FO Talks. I'm Peter Isaacson, Fair Observer's Chief Strategy Officer. Today I'm joined by retired Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, who is remembered for having made significant contributions to India's maritime security through his distinguished career in the Indian Navy. He's particularly remembered for his efforts to modernize and strengthen the Navy, with a particular focus on enhancing its air capabilities and integrating new technologies. So we find ourselves today at what some people are thinking of or describing as a historic moment after the election of Donald Trump, which has an impact on everything that's going on in the world today. So, Shekhar, I would really like to ask you about how you see the situation in the world today, obviously from an Indian point of view, but what your immediate impression is in terms of geopolitical importance for India of what's happened in the US and how you see it playing out in the coming months. Just general impressions.
Well, thank you, Peter, for inviting me to speak to you. I really love it talking to a Fair Observer. Atul has taken few talks in the past, and and he's a good friend, and so is everybody in Fair Observer. Now, this is a great question because everybody is talking about the change of international order. It is in churn, and the leadership of the US, the single sort of owner of the economic and military leadership, is on the decline, and China is rising, and therefore the worry is for the US that can he delay the rise of China? Now, my view is that because China leads an autocratic system, whereas US leads majority of the democracies, not that it doesn't deal with autocracies, it does, in all of Gulf is autocrat. But by and large, I think it's a leader of the democratic world. Now, our view here in India, by and large, is that I have been saying that, well, America is not on decline. Why I say this? It is not America's decline. It is because China and other countries are catching up. They're reducing the gap. Because even as on date, Peter, the below US, China, Japan, and India put together, the GDP is still less than the GDP of USA. And I would say that so is the military power. Though the US Navy keeps counting the ships, my suggestion to my US Navy friends is that, look, the quantity and quality are two different things. Chinese have no combat experience, number one. And they believe that their quality is quantity. They will flood you with the attacks, they will flood you with the aircraft and ships and submarines. But that doesn't mean that they have a good ability to fight, because they haven't got an opportunity. And the opportunity they get is to go and nudge these very small countries who are not a match. In South China Sea, they're very small countries. You go and hit their, Coast Guard ship or a supply ship, or, you thram them and throw them out of an island. Well, there's no big deal. You're not fighting with your equals. The only time they have found a match is when they met India on the Ladakh border. And they found that it was quite tough going. And one of the reasons because of the thaw right now in the relationship, which probably you'll probably ask me later. But I would say that the victory of President Trump, which may have come as a bit of surprise in the US, but here in India, the general feeling was that Trump will win. And that actually emerges from the fact that Trump and Prime Minister Modi have been good friends, and he hasn't done anything, which puts India in a bad light or a bad sort of position, except the trade embargoes in some of the trade. It took India out of the so-called the favored nation sort of list and all that. But I would think that, that goes across the board. If you see the sanctions on trade, it was less for India compared to any other country of this kind. After all, it was during President Trump's previous tenure that it got an exempt from making the Chabahar port in Iran. It got an exempt for many other small things that, okay, fine, this is India's requirement and India must meet this if we want them to be our friends. The Quad came about and he renamed the Pacific Command PACOM as Indo-Pacific Command, basically to include India and show some ownership. So I think that even if it is multipolarity, China says that there is going to be no bipolar world, and manner in which the BRICS is getting together. Uh, so my belief is that it is heading towards multipolarity, and I think the Americans should get used to it. But Americans are not ready for it, particularly not the present leadership of the Democrats. I would think that President Trump would be president will be more realistic. And he was realistic when he was first time. He said, we are not the policemen of the world. People must spend own money on their own security, and he really got after the European Union. And that's why you find that EU, there's a complete chaos. They just don't know where to go and how to go. German Chancellor, when he got the whiff that President Trump is likely to come back, he came to India immediately to start doing some more trade talk. Otherwise, they won't. They already have a fair amount of trade, but they want to increase it further. He came at a very short notice and obviously has signed some useful deeds. So I would think that America is going through a little bit of turbulent time because other countries are catching up very quickly. And I think that what worries America more is the axis of the China, Russia, Iran, and possibly North Korea. And that is as the Americans call it, the think tanks, it's an axis of the evil. Now, axis of the evil, yes, possible. So I think that this churning will result in a little bit of different setup, the manner in which the world is being governed. And the dollar could see a reduction of his utility. I won't say reduction of his exchange rate, because that may not happen. The world cannot do without the dollar at the moment, which Indian Prime Minister also said in the BRICS meeting. However, an alternate method of payment is being looked at. For example, trade in your own currencies. Now, what do Russians do with Indian rupees? So you're looking at some rupee investment in India, or India exporting more items to other countries, so that the exchange of the rupee trade and ruble trade becomes a little equitable. So we are in that difficult time right now, and I think President Trump will really probably shrink America's influence in the world, and therefore it is time for the middle powers to form their own little domain, and in the multipolarity they will have a very good equation with every other country. Every poll leader will probably have a good equation, because you can't do without each other. You can't do without China.
Okay.
I think that I'll stop here. I think that there is a fair amount of churn, and very difficult to say which way it will turn. But this is the way that we look at it in India.
Okay, you've raised a number of points, which we'll come back to. You evoked the question that your assessment of Trump as someone who's more realistic. I suppose you're using, this is a reference to realism, the kind of realism that's represented by political thinkers such as John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt. That I would take to be an implicit criticism of US foreign policy today under the Biden administration. So you're talking about a change in attitude. Is that correct?
True.
So if we look at the implications of realism, I was very interested in what you said about the comparative military capacity of China, India, and the US. Obviously, China and the US is the major comparison.
Sure.
When you talk about things like that, are you supposing that we're not necessarily on the brink of war, but that, as some American generals are saying, they're expecting a war with China by 2027? Is that a fair assessment of the way the world looks? And is that a fair assessment, or is that a fair assessment of the way it might have looked if Biden or Harris or the Democrats had remained in power? But is there anything different if it's Trump?
I would think, Peter, that the sense that we get here, and one has been writing articles in the local newspapers, etc., that chances of war with China are very minimal. I don't think any country wants to go on war with anybody, and more so when President Trump is coming to power. It was a little more risky in the time of the Biden administration and possibly followed by Kamala Harris, because one doesn't know about her, what approach she will have to foreign policy. One would like to believe that she will continue with the Biden policy, Biden sort of theory. But having said that, there is no doubt that should China attempt to take over Taiwan by force, America will come to their rescue because they are bound by that act. Also, at some point in time, President Trump would be briefed by the Pentagon, by the State Department, and he will get to know what is the current situation. Right now, he knows the situation, what he reads in the media, or he reads in the print, or his guys tell him, being outside the governance model. But the realities will dawn on him when he actually sits on the chair and is getting briefing after briefing every day. For example, I hear that Pompeo is likely to become Secretary of Defense, but I guess that going to war is not going to be one secretary's input, if at all he becomes. But there's Secretary of State, there are a whole lot of people who are looking after economy. They're looking after so many other things. So I would think that going to war at the moment, the chances would have reduced, to my mind, when President Trump actually takes over the reins. He has already warned. He doesn't want war. He's already warned Israel. He says, "Buddy, wind up Gaza." He's already said, yeah, he's already told them before he took over. Similarly, he has told that we should stop this, Russia, Ukraine, and they should start talking. And Russian president, just yesterday or this morning, he has said, he has congratulated would-be President Trump, and he has said that they are willing to talk. So you can see some symptoms, and President Putin, having been in the chair for 15, 20, 25 years, God knows how many years, he has fairly good sort of hold of the geopolitical situation in the world. Today, I believe there's a very intensive fight or attack on Odessa, and it is quite possible that Odessa might fall, because earlier, long back, when Ukraine was part of Soviet Union, Odessa was a fleet headquarters of the Russian fleet. So the point is that war chances less. The America's hand in so many places, you will find that shrinking, because he doesn't want that he fights somebody else's war. I would.
Okay, so given everything that's happened in the last nearly 3 years in Ukraine, how do you see the Americans themselves assessing their own ability to make war or win a war or support a war? I mean, these are very odd wars we've got going on now in Ukraine. Ukraine is obviously a proxy war, but it's also a NATO war. It's NATO without NATO troops. It's American without American troops. Then you've got the war in Gaza and Lebanon, and the West Bank as well. I mean, that it's becoming a regional war, and it reveals regional ambitions on the part of Israel. The U.S. has taken an ambiguous position in both of these theaters of war. My question is, what does this tell us about the ability of Americans to get involved in a war? And we can talk about Taiwan as a specific case. And what does it say about their attitude as well? I'll just give you one impression I got during the election itself, when the returns were coming in. I saw an interview with a young Republican activist who had supported the Trump campaign. And when the journalist asked him what motivated him, he said some of the usual things about the economy, but he also insisted, he said, and he was a 20-year-old, he was a 20-year-old, because this was his first opportunity to vote in an election. And he said that he himself and all his friends had become, who perhaps 10 years ago would have been Democrats, had endorsed Trump and were very active supporting him because they were afraid of being sent to war somewhere. So that the motivation was that they saw Trump as a peace candidate, although he never declared himself to be a peace candidate, but he did say he was against the war. Now, so I asked you the question about, I know you're not in the US and you're not in a position to talk about what the atmosphere is in the US, but do you detect a reticence of not only Trump, but of the US in general to engage in war? And is that one of the reasons you think that war is not so likely?
Yeah, you're right, Peter. I don't think that common man in the US wants US to get involved in any war. They have had enough. And wherever they have got directly involved, they have had number of body bags, returning back to the US. And that has actually led to then President Trump declaring to withdraw from Afghanistan. And not much choice was left with President Biden. He had to withdraw, and a lot of people were sort of complaining that you started off with, getting rid of the terrorist and you handed over the reins to him. So he said, fine, but at least our body bags are not coming back. Nobody wants a body bag. I mean, US has been involved war after war after war. It's a direct involvement is a loss of human lives. It has got, little anti impression in the public. And now that they have voted, is absolutely significantly determined to make Trump as the president. I would believe that this is one of the factors. So that young man, what he was saying is right. Also, look at the new chief of staff, Susie. She's been she's the campaign chief of Donald Trump, and all the narrative that President Trump would be president has been making has actually been drafted by her, basically, and she's going to be the chief of staff. So I think that this is just one sign that that this is how it is going to work. A second point is, it's very interesting question that you have asked. Our sense here is that President Trump, as far as NATO is concerned, his thought about NATO is quite well known. In fact, in lighter vein, he says, what is NATO doing? We don't have a Second World War situation. One of the very informal get-togethers. And he has told every country that unless you spend, 1 or 2% of your GDP, we are not going to fund you fighting a war. So there you go. He said that why should I be spending money for fighting your war? And that means in the NATO. He's always questioned NATO's viability today. But NATO is not going to disappear soon. But there are cracks within the NATO. There are already symptoms. I think, the love affair between France and Germany is long over. Many times they have, differed. but they have survived because of European Union. And these two are the main sort of money partners of the European Union. Rest are all surviving because of these two, to be very honest. Third
But
country was Britain, which is
there's a state of political chaos in both countries now.
yeah,
I'm living in France, and
yeah,
you know, and the German government collapsed
yeah,
just 3 days ago.
that's right.
Uh, so that's a symptom of what could happen to NATO itself.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. You know, the French government, the president has just survived because the government nearly went fully right. And wherever the governments are going to extreme right, Peter, my sense is it is all to do with illegal migrants and particularly the Islamic migrants. There is chaos in every country. I'm sorry I have to say this very openly, but this is a fact. Every country is having this problem. You take Belgium, you take France, you take Germany, you take UK, and Italy. I'm glad Meloni is the head, and she just does not like any kind of migrant from anywhere. So we are saying extreme right governments have come because of their internal situation being very similar to each other, as far as the migrants are concerned. But having said that, it will not be very easy to break up so very early. But if President Trump, when he becomes a president, if he washes off his hands completely from not supporting them, then the NATO will find it quite difficult to mind their own business as far as the security is concerned. They will think twice before they support any two other countries' war. Unless it is direct threat to the NATO countries, I don't think they will. And that is one reason why Ukraine wanted to come into this. And President Biden was very keen that it should join the NATO. But I don't think the European Union wants Ukraine anywhere near NATO. So
Yeah,
and
I think it's a very I mean, looking at it from a European point of view, which I do, it's very complex.
it is complex. Yeah.
And now that's why I think it's interesting to look at what it means to have a new Trump presidency, because it puts it panics a lot of people in France.
Yeah.
So my take from our conversation is that India is less panicked than Europeans are now. And you mentioned the fact that I mean, all the experts I've been listening to have been talking about how it's absolutely unthinkable that Ukraine has the capacity to resist and to win the war, which Biden promised he would guarantee in a certain sense. He would fight it till the bitter end, but the way it looks today, as you say, Odessa may fall, which means that Russia would be in a position to control the entire Black Sea coast of Ukraine, which obviously has a lot of meaning for Russians because it's their lifeline to the south, to warm waters. But my question is, given that there's no likelihood of Ukraine winning, and Biden is no longer there to defend that position, how do you see this panning out? What kind of agreement, what kind of settlement can be reached? What kind of peace could be achieved? Could it be a permanent peace, or would it be something very fragile, which means that we'd be looking forward to further incidents and further flare-ups of a situation that's become stagnant? How do you see it?
Peter, the discussions that we have been having here on this issue, we have had a number of discussions about Ukraine and this. First thing is, the peace between Ukraine and Russia will actually scripted in Washington. I don't think that two such unequal, uneven powers can have talk amongst each other and come to some, acceptable solution. And I think the Washington will have to be very much in the middle. Let's see who comes as the Secretary of State. And a lot will depend on the Secretary of State who comes, and because then they will have an internal briefing and go ahead and do that. Now, what will be the outcome? I think whichever we look at, first point that I want to make is all the Western media regarding Ukraine is winning is false. They have not given the actual figures of anything, losses, machines, people, etc., etc. Now, if you go to Ukraine, you can sense as to how the country has been suffering. You go to Russia, you will feel that it is life as usual. People are just not having fun like they used to have earlier. I've just been there in month of June. I was in Moscow for about a week. And I think that I didn't find any sense when I asked somebody, I can understand a little bit of Russian, speak in broken Russian. But those who could speak English, they said, no, I mean, it's Ukraine, we will take hands down. I said, but it has already taken 3 years. They said, yeah, that is because President Putin is giving them a lot of hope. This is the impression. Not that they know a lot about what is happening, but they certainly know the losses of the Russian troops, which has been quite a lot. And he has sacked the 2 generals. So it was a very foolish thing to assume that a special operation will see through the Ukraine battle. It would have had America and EU not pitched in. Initially, it looked that it is going to be walk over by the Russians, but within no time, they realized that they have come very close to their intention of scuttling the intention of getting Ukraine into the EU and part of NATO, which was the later on, much later, last year, he said, no, we have no intention of joining the NATO. This Zelensky said. Had he
Yes,
said it on day
said
one, the war wouldn't have taken place. Because the whole fundamental issue of Putin is that the NATO has expanded, has come to my border. We have ideological differences, and we had agreed that they will not move any further eastward, which they have come. And therefore, I have to protect my ideology. There's no question of letting them move. So just see the amount of money which has been spent. You think rebuilding of Ukraine is going to be easy for the West? I suspect no. And you mentioned about President Biden saying that they will support till the Ukrainians win. But he also said we will keep supporting Ukraine till the last Ukrainian is there to fight. And I think that situation will come if Biden had been here. Only one Ukrainian would have been left. With already so many foreign troops. So I would think that President Trump and his team, they will take some fair, and President Putin is not so much, averse to President Trump. You know it better than I do. And he has already congratulated him and he has said he is ready for talk. So I think that Trump enjoys a better reputation with Putin, more amicable to what Trump will say.
So do you think, it's all speculation now, but knowing all these things and appreciating the positions that Biden and Trump have taken historically, is there any likelihood that the US will start cutting off funding to Ukraine, in which case that would precipitate negotiations, it would seem to me, because there's no way Ukraine can continue to wage the war without being certain that they were going to get weapons and money from the US. Now, Europe could, and it was expected earlier this year that because the Republicans in the US were holding back from funding Ukraine, the Ukraine war, that Europe would have to step up and do that funding. Germany made some commitments. Everyone did. NATO made, the European members of NATO made a kind of moral commitment, which was more than a moral commitment. It was a promise to keep funding the war and to find a way of funding it for as long as it takes, really, to follow the logic of Biden. And they did that. Of course, they found one way of doing that, which was by taking the money that was the interest on the seized, the frozen assets of Russia to pay for that. So they had worked out this strategy of funding the war. But now it looks like it won't be funded. It also looks like there's no way on the ground that the Ukrainians can win the war. So is there any likelihood that something dramatic will happen? Would it be in Biden's interest to have something dramatic happen to discredit Trump or whatever? I mean, it seems to me that we're in a situation where we don't know we don't know who's going to make which decisions. And yet we are at a point where things just simply cannot continue. There's no way of carrying them on into the future. So where are we? I mean, you don't know. I don't know. Trump himself doesn't know what he's going to decide. But it seems to me that there has to be some kind of scenario, credible scenario, that will tell us that within 6 months the war will be over. In which case, we have to know who's going to benefit and what it's going to leave as a situation of advantage or disadvantage for the different parties concerned.
Well,
I don't know if it's a question. I don't know if it's
I know it's a little, looking at the crystal ball and gazing at the crystal ball. Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned yourself that it's a very complex story here, and we're difficult for solving it in our rooms. But my own sense is one of the alternate methods is that US president is going to warn Ukraine that you better have a talk. Otherwise, in so much of time frame, I will start reducing giving you weapons. This is going to happen.
But can they even survive with that? I mean,
No.
Are you aware of the situation on the ground?
Yeah, they will not. They would have collapsed by now, Peter.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no match. Basically, the fight there is not between Ukraine and Russia. It is between Russia and the West.
Yeah.
All the weapon systems are of the Americans and the European Union.
Yeah.
So where is the fight? Ukraine has nothing. They've destroyed their entire, the complex, and that's why they're fighting with, the drones, and most of the drones are, Turkey and here and there. That's it, and the American. So point is that this cannot go on indefinitely, and nobody knows better than President Trump. He has already cautioned that start talking.
But he's not in power until the January 20th.
Yeah, I don't think that anything dramatic will happen. Only this morning I heard President Trump making a speech that don't think there is anything dramatic is going to happen. It is going to be smooth transition. We are not like Republicans. He just took a dig at the, that 6th of January or whatever that was. So he took a dig at him and he said, we are not Republicans, we are Democrats, and we behave in gentlemanly manner, and it will not happen. Second point you asked about the European Union. No, that is again very interesting. The European Union is already having debate for last year and a half whether they should be supporting this war or not be supporting. And it is on that account that the Germans and the French have fallen out. And one of the reasons why the election, you are in France, we have a French gentleman on our India Foundation. He's a distinguished fellow, French citizen, but he's been in India for a very long time, Com Carpentier. Now, and he keeps writing and he speaks on European Union and this war, and he's our own guy. So we have some sort of input from that end. Now, the point is that one of the reasons, apart from this migrant issue in France, another issue is that far-right people who have not come to power much against this war in which France is supporting.
Yeah.
Okay. It would have actually gone that side. That is why, they are on the neutral, on the middle wicket. It could have easily gone to the right. Initially, it was looking that, President Macron will also go because he will not have supporting parliament. But fortunately, he survived, and very marginally. So I would see that, and I can see that. I don't know what is the reason why the German chancellor has to resign because of coalition ministry. What was the main reason for that? One of the reasons was financial. That Germany is spending too much money in other than what suits the Germans. You can't take fight with China. Germans have realized. Therefore, moment the president Xi took over, he rushed across. The chancellor rushed across, and he just went and said, "Come on, I hope you not do anything to our industry. We have a different take because we are in the NATO and we are supporting this. But that doesn't mean that we have no complaints against you. Keep manufacturing because the profit margins are very hell of a lot. BMW, Mercedes Benz, and what have you all top end vehicles are being manufactured there. Germany doesn't make anything inside.
That's
So the
right.
point is that financial issue is a big issue. Other countries in the EU, I'm sorry, I don't think they're worth talking about because they don't have any,
Yeah.
maybe little bit of Italy, but I would say that the main architects are France and Germany, and there is fair amount of disagreement within their own government, and also between France and Germany. So I would think that the European Union or the NATO will ride piggyback onto what America says, and better do. If President Trump says that sorry, we are not going to support, no way EU or NATO going to say that we will support. No question.
Yeah.
They will take a bully from Trump, but they will not go against him by supporting this if he says we don't have to support. So I think that it's fairly clear in at least our minds, whatever little we understand of this politics. One has been following it for a long time, and we are totally connected with the American politics. We watch American politics more closely than our own politics, to be very honest, because it impacts the whole world, as you rightly say. I'm talking about the world order changing, the world order under turmoil, etc., etc. That is because established leadership is likely to get marginalized, not because it is on the decline. That is because USA's own doing that the Chinese have caught up with them. Own doing, nobody else.
Yes.
There's no reason for entire industry to shift there just because it was cheaper. Now he has stolen everything. You name it, he has stolen damn chip manufacturing IPR. The space. They've only got a space station. So I think I have a feeling that much to everybody's surprise, Trump might come out as a peacemaker.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean,
So,
that's what we feel here.
yeah. Well, let's move to another theater of war in the Middle East. That's also going to be influenced by whatever Trump decides. And we know a lot less about his position on that. But we're talking about what I mentioned is already a regional war, and which a lot of people think is going to evolve very quickly into a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran. And if Israel commits to a war with Iran, Netanyahu is expecting the US to follow. From an Indian point of view, what does this look like? Because Iran we're getting into your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of Indian initiative that does India have a role to play in this debate?
Well, there are two things. One is from the time it has been declared that Donald Trump will be the president, the first reaction was from the Houthis in Yemen. They have said our mission in the Red Sea is complete, right? It is not because of any love. They have realized that if they carry on, the US is going to butcher them. US will butcher them not because they have any big love for Israel, because they don't want the Saudis to suffer. The Yemen, the official government is supported run by the Saudis, and Saudi is all said and done big partner of the US. There's so much of trade, there's so much of defense sort of cooperation. And what happens to the oil money, etc., that is much later. That is number one. The second thing is Netanyahu has been told that you wind up this war, right? And therefore, I don't foresee, its expansion. Even the Iranians will not do it because they know that the nuclear weapon that they are jumping on, the Israelis have the capability of disabling their nuclear launch capability. Number one. Secondly, India is in a little precarious situation because both countries are friends of India. Okay, Israel, Netanyahu is a personal friend of Mr. Modi, and Iran civilizationally connect, and there are so many other issues. We have a Chawar port, which the Iranians have given, and not only in President Trump's time that he exempted India from getting into any sanctioned regime, Katsa, etc. He said no. This is for helping the human rights, humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan, which is right. That is what it is being used for. Now, I would suspect that if Iran knows that the Israelis have the capability of disabling their nuclear system, command control system, which they know, and that therefore they have not chosen to escalate the war. And they've been keep saying that, this is in response to so and so thing. And Israelis say this is in response to so and so thing. So this will happen. Now, thing is that, the now Houthis I mentioned to you, that leaves the other two H. One is Hamas and one is Hezbollah. Now, Hamas is, it cannot be decimated completely because it is not war of weapons. It is war of ideology. And ideologies don't get destroyed. You might kill them for the time being. Some leaders will form group and they will come up again. It's a ideological differences between the two civilizational countries, between the Islamic and the Judaism. So this is the difficult one. But look at this. Look at the dichotomy. Hamas was created by Israel because Hamas is all Sunni, and Hezbollah is all Shia. It was created and supported by Israel to take on the Hezbollah. Hamas was made to actually take on Hezbollah on the lines of Sunni and Shia. Whereas now the Iranians have started supporting them because they say that your common enemy of Islam, they brought Islam now, not Shia Sunni, that your common enemy are the Jews. At some point in time, this is going to play out. And then Hezbollah will be left alone. Hamas is not going to last for very long. Hezbollah will, but it is draining out the Iranians. Let's not forget that there is a lot of sanction on Iran, and they are okay. They've got very homegrown industry, etc., etc. And the Shias, by history, they're slightly better sort of equipped with the head power and brain power than the Sunnis, whatever the reason. So I would think that all these countries are doing a reassessment of the arrival of President Trump. How will he react? Once again, a complex situation. Netanyahu is very happy that he has come, and he feels that he will support him. President Trump has also mentioned in one of his that he will, of course, he will support Israel, but he would like the war to end. So let us see how that is. These are little conflicting sort of statements that he has made. How will the war end when he is also wanting to support? Will that support be conditional that, okay, you call off the war? And you also mentioned that on what, going back to Ukraine, you said on what where will this, whose advantage? Obviously, it will be to Russian advantage, but America will see that the Ukrainians don't lose out completely. Some areas, the Russians will have to withdraw. For example, I feel that part of the Kyiv city, Russians will have to withdraw. Whereas, the Luhansk and what is that other one? The two areas that is mainly Russian speaking, they have always been wanted, they always wanting to be Russian, and they speak Russian, they would be happy to go. And I would think that President Putin will be happy to have that kind of solution. So pull out from everywhere else except for these two. Donbass and Luhansk. These two places will go back to Russia. And that's all was their single intention. No more intention. They will stop. Otherwise, the Odessa will fall. I know this will fall in few days.
No, I tend to think that the Ukrainian situation has to calm down, let's say, find some kind of at least temporary solution, simply to so that everyone can regroup their forces and concentrate on whatever they have to do, especially because we now have a new administration in the US. And Trump has said he wants to concentrate on the rivalry or enmity that exists with China.
Yeah.
But to go back to Israel, it seems to me that the real point of ambiguity is we don't really know what Israel is trying to accomplish. It's one thing to say that they want to prevent future October 7th and that they want to neutralize Hamas, and then also do something similar with Hezbollah. But from what I'm hearing is that the IDF is having a great deal of difficulty in Lebanon, in their campaign in Lebanon. They're losing a lot of lives and casualties.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look. It doesn't look as if Israel can accomplish its goal. And what most people, I think, agree now is that Israel's goal is not just solving the October 7th problems or bringing back the hostages, but it's achieving a level of security which they call Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, which means controlling the entire area. And I'm skeptical personally that Trump, who may be in favor of that because of his sympathy with and his relationship with Netanyahu, I'm skeptical that that can actually be achieved without some kind of military engagement by the US. So how likely is that Trump would actually put American boots on the ground in Israel?
You know, Peter, when you have a ground forces conflict, I dare say that IDF is not very good in it because all their campaigns have been air battles.
Yeah.
Okay. And the day the IDF army entered Lebanon, we had a meeting amongst ourselves. And we had an Israeli think tank who was here about last week. And this was our question. Our question was that why has the IDF been committed? Because he said that there's some leaders of Hezbollah who are hiding in places where only army can reach. I said, but that takes you away from, decimating Hamas, which you are nearly going to achieve. This was not your aim. That is just because in support of Hamas, they started, throwing weapons on you. That's why you responded back. So Lebanon war is absolutely uninvited. It should not have taken place.
Yeah.
It's just because the Hezbollah in support of Hamas fingered the, Israelis, they have responded back in kind. And this is not a result yielding fight. They will continue to lose people, and Israel can hardly afford to lose people.
Exactly. They've lost a lot of people from emigration.
We are aware. So the point is that if it is not a achievable victory, and it is only to take out some leaders like it is happening, but in the bargain they're losing a lot of people because they know where the guy is, but to reach him is a little bit difficult because Lebanon was out of their sort of window for some time. So this is to reactivating their contacts in Lebanon, and that is what they're doing. But in the bargain, they're losing people. And I would think that if they have decimated Hamas to a large extent, which they have, in exchange to getting the hostages back, the Israelis will do better to accept that situation that okay, they will release the hostages, stop all this. And I can be reasonably certain that Americans will not commit boots on the ground. Because, the American lives, a lot of lives have been lost everywhere in the world, find American boots on the ground. And I personally feel that there's not much stomach for fighting sort of land battles, my sense. I meet a lot of my American friends, a large number of friends. I mean, we are, after all, very much Western in our thinking. We have been on the British system and all that. Plus, we have many agreements with US. So I would think that, now you also ask for role of Mr. Modi. Yes, he is talking to Netanyahu reasonably frequently. He has been talking to the new president of Iran on and off. And he's trying to say that, okay, if you guys agree, if you think my indulgence is going to help, I'm willing to help. He said it very open. This part he has said openly. And he's talking to them. He's talking to them, he's talking to Putin, he's also talking to Zelensky. But, Indians have this little bit of reserved idea, because India has not been into this game of negotiation and putting two countries together. So this is the first time. That's why the Indian Foreign Service bureaucracy, fortunately, we have a foreign minister who's also a sort of diplomat, was a career diplomat. So that decision they will have to take, and they will have to see as to how will this whole calendar of geopolitics is sort of panning out. And is it going to be like, Prime Minister Modi said, this is not time for war. He has repeated this. He's told this in BRICS summit also to Putin and to everybody else. This is not time for war. I think we should just have peace and progress. Enough bloodshed has taken place, enough money has gone, enough lives have been destroyed. I think we should just put a stop to it. So if that appeals the people, then I'm sure that President Trump may consider using Modi's persuasion to Iran and Modi's also persuasion on the other side to Israel, to see how, and to Russia.
Okay, we're getting towards the end of our time limit. I wanted to ask you, because we're on the subject of India's role in the region, and yeah, we could talk about BRICS as well, but that's probably too complicated an issue. I wanted to talk about military technology, because that's obviously, from India's point of view, the whole question of what kind of technology and whose technology you're using is part of your geopolitical positioning. And traditionally, obviously, since after independence, it was basically the Soviet Union who supplied nearly all, correct me if I'm wrong, but nearly all of your military technology. But in recent years and even decades, you've diversified your supply chains, and you're getting military equipment from the US, France, Israel as well, and the UK. What does this mean in terms of, first of all, operations themselves, military operations? And what does it mean in terms of geopolitical relationships?
Peter, I mean, once again, it's a really brilliant question, and I'll find it tough to give you all satisfactory answer. But with the Russians, we always had this buyer and seller relationship. There was no technology transferred really, if you see in the real terms. I mean, they will supply you the components and you assemble it here and you fly it. No, we bought it because the Americans declined to give you. Pandit Nehru had gone to America first.
Yeah.
They could not give, mainly because at that time the geopolitical situation warranted America to support the Pakistanis. At Seato, Cento and all that. Mainly because they didn't want the Soviet Union to go through Afghanistan and Pakistan into the warm waters of Indian Ocean, warm water ports. So that be the reason he had no choice but to go to the Russians to buy. Initially, we had all British, legacy. So now, as on date, I just attended one seminar a few days back, and the Chief of Naval Staff made a mention that as far as Navy is concerned, we are only with legacy items, which is about 52%. 48% is not Russian because Navy has indigenized long back. We make our own ships, we don't buy it. Except for the legacy, 2 ships were left and I think they are coming. But otherwise, ships are built here. We are making almost all weapon systems. We are making almost all electronics, except for few where we are being helped to some extent by the French and the Dutch. Okay, because they are quite high on them. Now, our very non-demanding partner is France. Like, the US, by the nature of their regulations, they have too many hurdles. Not hurdles, end user certification, this, that, you will not use it here. Not. So you have to be answerable. But the French are not. I mean, US must be for their own reason because they are see, there are two things before I go further, I want to make it clear that when the American administration, the US administration said that, India is not really our friend because look at it, what they're doing with Russia, buying oil, etc. So we said, I mean, at least I've been saying in various forums in America also, I go there reasonably often. And I said, look, when it comes to maritime, India and US will be the closest partners. Why? The ultimate objective is same. Make sure that China does not sit on our head because the manner in which they have behaved in South China Sea, he might behave here. They have already, befriended all our neighbors and they want to have military base, they want to have radar. So which will put India in a very precarious situation. They will be under surveillance of the Chinese, which we don't want. That is one. So we have same intention, and based on that, will the American help will keep coming, whichever technology you want. But as far as the very high-end technology is concerned, the Americans will not part with it. For example, the G414 engine, which is being built in India, 90% is being transferred. 10% the blade technology and refining of the blade, the diamond, etc., cutting, that we don't have because our metallurgy somehow was left alone. In the Industrial Revolution, the Britishers did not pass us we were not independent. I mean, that's it. As far as Russia is concerned, as far as the continental strategy is concerned, I say this repeatedly every time to every forum, that continental strategy between America and India will always be divergent. Whether at sea, it will be always convergent because the same intention. Because the continent, America looks at it as a superpower of the world. He looks at it, okay, is it sort of, Mackinder and Mahan theory that comes into play, right? Whereas India looks at it from the point of view its own territorial integrity. All the attacks have taken place from north and northwest. And who has supported you? Russia. Every time. Be it in the United Nations, be it veto, be it taking a stand against China, take a stand against Pakistan, Kashmir issue, it's always been Russia. Similarly, we wanted to make a nuclear submarine. So with great difficulty, we took one nuclear submarine on lease. And later on, we said that, can we have the design? We will make it ourselves. So after much persuasion, we have already taken that submarine for lease on 10 years. They gave us the design. And our Bhabha Atomic Energy, thankfully, they are capable enough. So they made the one. Now they're making on their own design. So if the whole concept of looking at continent is so different, the prism through which India looks at continent is totally from the territorial integrity and the attacks. And it is because of the history. And even now it is going on. You see the border issue. Look at POK. So India is not done. We have 2 live borders. Peter, it means a lot of commitment of soldiers and your equipment. So that is why. But I would think that America will slowly, I mean, Biden administration was a little upset and therefore most of these commitments have been delayed. I would think that, it should fall back in track. This is one thing that I feel. That I said the emerging and whatever the technologies. They will come. They are very gradual, but they will happen. And there is a lot of focus on self-reliant, made in India. Well, it's in full swing. We have never exported any arms and ammunition. Now, last year we have exported some 27,000 crores, which is about $270 billion. It's quite a lot. So I think that the India US friendship, as far as maritime issues are concerned, uh, they will remain so. We will continue to have the differences on the land.
Okay, could I ask you a very we'll try to wind up with this, a very specific question, because you talked about nuclear submarines. What is the Indian position or reaction to AUKUS and what happened between France and Australia? The deal that was broken, but that was for submarines, which were not nuclear submarines from France, and the choice of equipping Australia with nuclear submarines. How does India see that question and the AUKUS in general?
We thought that it is supplementing the Quad. We looked at it here for very open mind that no, I
But
think
you're not part of it. You are part of the Quad, but not
yeah,
AUKUS.
that's okay. That's okay. Because we looked at that, the countries with whom America can share this technology are limited. They're all, pardon my saying, they're all Anglo-Saxon, and therefore it can't go out. So they haven't taken Japan as well. So I would think that is fine because, you have a little more confidence, you have a little more sort of genetic sort of equation, which is perfectly all right. We all do it. But AUKUS has failed. It's not taken off. I hope you know
Mhm.
this. The reason is the day the discussions were going on after AUKUS was declared, I was on a track to meeting in Perth. And they were also having, apart from the Indian Ocean thing, they were also having a discussion in a separate closed door about some 37 involved people as to how should they go about making submarines. So I was not required because I am outsider. But while I was having coffee with some friends, some Australian friends, American friends, they sent a word. He said, "Ki Admiral Sinha, they're saying." I said, "But I'm not supposed to be there." He said, "No, sir, I have been told by the to call you." I said, "Okay." I went and I was a stranger. I was only sort of non-white guy there. They're all Americans and British and all.
Anglo-Saxons.
Anglo-Saxon. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. So they said, what do you suggest since you people made the nuclear submarine on your own? And what do you suggest? How did you go about it? I said, look, what my suggestion will be that for making a nuclear submarine, first you have to develop the industries, the ecosystem, where the components will be built. Smaller components, hydraulic pump, hydraulic this, jack, because they have to be made to perfection. You cannot make mistakes in nuclear submarine. So if you find that your MSMEs are not capable or they're not knowing, I would suggest to speak to Government of India. And I'm sure that we have developed fair amount of ecosystem now that we are making nuclear submarines one after another. So nothing comes from outside. It's 100% Indian, including the missiles. So I would suggest that you have a tab with the MSME and see where you go. Because it's firstly making is one issue. America giving you one is another issue. And British are doing your training is another issue. Will you become self-sustaining for which you have been chosen? I suspect that takes a long time. And that is why the Americans realized, the Australians realized, and therefore the US government took a decision that they will base 2 or 3 of their submarines in Perth, in Fremantle. And the British officers and sailors will be there to train them. So it will fly under the Australian flag, but it will be a sort of hodgepodge of these three. So this is where it stands. They have said, sorry, we can't make that. That is absolutely obviously the component manufacturing is the key.
Yeah.
That's it. I would say that it was non-workable, and I think it is better to operate from Fremantle You want to give it a lease, give it a lease. You are training people in England, all the Australian officers. I know 2, 3 officers who are there, senior 2 admirals I know. So it's okay. That is how it should start. But to say that America will give you every cow, he can't really make your MSMEs capable. That these guys will have to do on their own. You can go send them to Britain, you can send, because those people are not making nuclear submarines, every day. The country which is making one after other is India. Might as well go there. So I suggest that you have a talk with the Indian government, and if anything, I can, whatever little as an outsider, I'm a private citizen now. Whatever I can do, I can talk to Navy and I can talk. So
yes, that would be very interesting to explore that further. We've just had this cataclysmic event, election, and I've raised all these questions. How are people reacting? This is what I'm trying to
there's
assess.
a good reaction in India.
Yeah, so that's good. That's good. And it will be really interesting to see how these things play out, especially over the next 3 to 4 months.
2019 or 20 election in the US, I had been to Hudson for something else. Now the audience was about 150, 200, which is quite a lot for DC. So they asked me that, what do you think about the election? President Biden and Trump are fighting. I said, look, it's very difficult to say in a democracy who will win. So I can't guess about yours. If it was Indian, I could have given some guess, but here it's a wild guess. But let me tell you one thing. Whether India was pro-Trump, not pro-Trump, that is, I'll leave it to your wisdom. But let me tell you one thing, that American people have always taken these decisions with much wider perspective as to what is the world view of the likely president. I said, you tell me which is the foreign policy in which Trump has failed. I said none.
Yeah.
He has kept Iran in place. He has kept North Korea in place. He's gone and shaken hands with him in Singapore. There was no nuclear missile test during that 4 years. He has kept China in place by trade war. Russia became friends. Venezuela was quiet. So where has he failed? He hasn't failed in your foreign policy.
North Korea. He promised fire and fury, and he actually stabilized things.
Yeah, but the point is that North Korea did not fire.
Yeah.
In that 4 years, it did not fire a single missile.
Yeah.
That you must grant him. That is because he called him and he met him in Singapore, shook hands, and and they had a deal. They had a deal that, come on, you can do later, don't do anything now because you'll aggravate. So he understood. First, he put trade war on China, which is a good thing, because North Korea is not alone. You please consider that it's the bloody vassal state of China, just like Pakistan. Pakistan is also vassal state. So next time we can talk about India-Pakistan relation and how China fits.
Yes, we're going to have to stop now. So thank you very much, and we'll get back to this in a short while.
Whenever, Peter. Thank you very much.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.